Hi guys, my name is Biora. In the last video, we worked on turning our perk IDs into perk names using Community Dragon. In this video, we're going to take all the work we've done so far and start storing it in SQL. Now, I'm going to show you how to get a PostgreSQL server set up, and then I'll show you how to actually convert your Python information into something that can be stored in SQL. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Google. We'll look up PostgreSQL, go to downloads here. And I'm going to download this for Windows, and we'll get the latest version. Click yes here, and then make sure pgadmin 4 is checked. Technically you don't need a stack builder. You can keep everything else though. And then here you're going to want to set a password for the super user, and then port, you can keep this as 5432. Again, locale you can keep as default, and then next, and we start installing. Again, I'm not going to worry about stack builder here. Just finish. And real quickly, I don't really need to do this, and you might not need to do this, but you might need to eventually, so I'm going to show you. I'm going to also add the bin to path, and to do that, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to look for the bin folder. We're going to copy this path here. And I'm going to go to my environment variables. If you remember, we did this in the early install Python videos. So edit system environment variables under user variables, path. I'm going to add this in here. Just hit OK. That allows you to use some SQL tools in the command line interface if you choose to in the future. So we're going to open something called pgadmin, which was installed on our computer. This is going to be our interface for interacting with our PostgreSQL server. And if you try to unfold this, you'll get prompted for your password. So I'm going to type mine in here. This is the one that you created during your installation. And then you get access to the server that was already created before you did anything. So you have databases in here. There's just the one database named Postgres. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to make a new server. So if we come here, we say add server. I'm going to call this LOL Analytics. And under connection, the host name will be localhost because we're going to be doing this on our own PC. In the future, you can find services that will provide hosting for you, but for now we're going to do it locally. And then I'll add password here, save that just for ease of access later. Okay, then we have our new server here. So in here under databases we have Postgres, which is our standard database, and I can actually rename this if I would like to. So I'm going to rename this to analytics, but I would actually like to make a new database. We'll call this one again LOL Analytics. Under in this case is Postgres. You can also make your own role if you would like to. Under definition, don't worry about anything here. Parameters, advanced SQL, don't need to change anything. We're just gonna make a blank database here. And then we have our public schema, which we keep, but we're gonna make a new one. And this one will be called SoloQ. And again, we're just doing a local server here. Don't need to worry about any security, any of that other stuff. So now that I have this, if I wanted to, I could come in here and make a table myself. I'll show you what that looks like. So if I wanted to make a table, I could say SoloQ. We can call this regional player matches. And under columns, I could manually add each new column here, but I'm not going to do that, and I'll show you why. So I'll make this table, and then in Python, I can actually do all of that with the data frame that I've created prior. So we're going to go to VS Code here, and before I do anything else, I'm going to go to my .env file, and we're going to start adding the information that we used for that database. So we'll say db username in this case is Postgres. We can say db host is localhost, db port is 5432, db name is LOL underscore analytics, and then I'm going to skip over the password part here, but I'm going to also add my password. And now if we come into our little sandbox here, we can say I want to import OS, and from .env I want to import load.env. We've done this in the past, and I want to load my environment variables. Then I'll say username is os.environ.get db username, and I'll do the same thing for the other parts of this. So password is password, host is host, port is port, and name is name. I'll make this db name, and actually we'll just add that to all these, so just to stay consistent. Now, the reason why I need these is because I need to use them for what is called a connection URL, and I'll show you why I need that. So if you notice down here, I pip installed a few things. I pip installed, here, I'll write them out here. I've pip installed Psycho PG2, I've pip installed Pangres, and I've pip installed something called SQLAlchemy. So you'll need these three. So this first one is what we use to basically connect Python to SQL to allow us to interact with the database. This one here is for upserting information, so taking our data frame and upserting it to our database. And then this SQLAlchemy here is to create a database engine which allows us to connect. So actually they kind of go in the reverse order. So we'll say import Pangres, actually we'll do from Pangres import upsert, and then from SQLAlchemy import text and create engine. So first thing we need to do is we need to create an engine that we can use to connect to our database. So we'll create engine, and it wants a URL, and this is our connection URL. So that looks like this. It'll be PostgreSQL plus Psycho PG2 ://, and then we're going to add our DB username, and then a colon, then we're going to add our DB password plus an @ symbol, and then we need our DB host plus another colon, and then our DB port plus a /, and then our DB name. And that'll essentially look like username : password @ host : port, and then / our database name, in this case LOL Analytics. So we'll say connection URL is that, we'll put that here. Or you know what, even better, we'll say define a function called create DB connection string, and I'll input DB username, DB password, DB host, DB port, and DB name, and then we'll simply return that connection URL just for ease later on, so we don't have to type that out every time. Now I'll take that and we'll say connection is that, and then I want that. Now the other parts of this, I want to do recycle, or pool recycle is 3600, and what that means is after 3600 seconds or 1 hour, the connection will reset. This way it doesn't just stay active forever, which is kind of what we want. So if we run this, we get our engine, and our engine can connect to our database. And what we can do here is we can say DB engine is that engine, and I want to connect from the engine, and that is our connection. So even further, I can say connection, and let me actually make this connection URL, right? So that is our connection. The reason why we need that is because to upsert any information, we need that connection. So con equals connection, and data frame in this case is equal to our data frame that we created earlier. And we're going to make a new schema named SoloQ. Table name in here, we'll name this regional player matches. And because we're making a new schema and a new table, we're going to say create table is true, create schema is true. And then in the future, if we want to future proof this, we can say if rows already exist, then we're going to update their information. So if we have a player in there and we want to update the information for a specific game, if we add new columns or whatever, we're going to update that instead of just creating a new row. And then one more thing we're going to have to do is, if you remember our data frame from before, we had this data frame, but it doesn't actually have any unique ID. And what I mean by that is we need a certain column in here that can act as a primary key. And a primary key is a column of information where every single value is unique, and you can use that for indexing. So we need to essentially create that. And the easiest way that I've found to do that is to combine the match ID with the player ID, because each player, in this case, it's Kumo. Kumo has only played in this game one time, in this game one time, so it's always going to be unique. So if I say df UUID is equal to df match ID plus underscore plus df PUID, I get a new column all the way at the back here, which is UUID. And so now if I say set index UUID, the index of the table is now that, which is required when you are upserting any table. You need the index to be the primary key. And then I'll want to make sure I solidify that change. And then if I run this, we get this check mark. But if we check, nothing has actually happened here. There's no new schema, no new tables, and that might be confusing, but that's because you have to commit the change. Similar to GitHub, if you're familiar with any GitHub commits. I'll say connection.commit, and I don't want to run this twice, but here, I'll do it down here actually. So connection.commit, and now if we look, I refresh, I have two schemas. One is SoloQ, and it has a table called regional player matches. And if I look at the columns, all the columns are here, and I can query this table. Select all from SoloQ.regional player matches, And when I query it, I get all of my information. The reason why I want to do this at all is because over time, it's a better way to store the information because querying it is way faster than trying to connect to the API every time. If you remember when we did all this stuff, this took 11.4 seconds to get those 20 games. But if I was to say with dbengine.connect as connection, df equals pd.read SQL this time, and we'll make a text object that says select all from SoloQ.regional player matches, and then we'll add our connection at the end here. That was 0.0 seconds, and I get the same information. So that's why we do this. You want to store that information because over time, it's going to take a long time to get, I can store 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 games, and I can get them in pretty much 0 seconds every time if I store them in SQL, which is the reason why we do all that. And from there, if I wanted to, I can say, I can even do this. I can say, we'll change these to triple quotes, which will allow me to add new lines without actually breaking the string. And I can do some SQL formatting in here. And we'll say where side equals red. And now that'll only give me games where the side is red. And if I wanted to make that a function string, I can take this out and I could say side, and I can make that a function. Define get games side equals none. And now I can say get SoloQ games side is red. Oh, sorry, I have to return that. Return df. And I'd get my red side games. And then if I want blue, I'd just change that to blue. Now we have our blue side games. And now we're getting into the part of this where you can actually look at this information and do something with it. Now we're getting to the point in this series where if you want to see these concepts expanded on, I would highly recommend you go to GitHub. You can go to my GitHub and find Riot API tools. And here I have the same kind of concepts, but expanded on. So if you go to the SQL folder, you'll find database utilities, which is where I keep, create DB connection string. I have that in here. I also have create DB engine, and then df to SQL, which is a more simplified version of essentially taking the data frame, the engine, schema name, table name, and then the primary key or keys. And then you can update tables using these here if you've made the same table names, or you can delete your table to create a new table for you. Although these are assuming that you're using a production key, but if you're not, you can use a Parquet file and do that instead. So you change Parquet to true here and then upload with a Parquet file. And to do that, you would just save, if you have a data frame, you can just save it as a Parquet file by doing this here, pd.to Parquet. And then, the data frame. So df.to Parquet, and then just name it whatever, .parquet, and it'll save it. So if I do that and hit enter, it'll save it like this. And then I can upsert from that Parquet file using these here. And in the next video, I might do a little GitHub refresher just to help people understand if they've never used it before, how to grab all this from GitHub and import it into your own PC. Because I'm assuming in the future videos, I'll just start using this instead because I've already written all this code. It makes it way easier for me. I'll show you how to manipulate code from there on. One last thing before I go. As I'm doing these YouTube videos, I'm learning more and more about how to actually make YouTube content. And one of the things that was suggested the most to me was to add this. So if you enjoy these videos, please remember to like, subscribe, comment, and turn on notifications if you're interested in seeing the next video. Thank you guys so much for the support. I'll see you next time.